IPGCE.com, a number of other different URLs and also programs. We work with a group of 6 universities in the UK, one of which is UWE Bristol, which we work with for the IPGCE and the iQTS programs, and also the MA in leadership. Other programs that we also do that we can potentially talk about are QTS assessment only, which we do with the University of Sunderland. And if anyone wants to ask any questions regarding that particular program, we can do that as well. So I'll let Sarah introduce herself.
Yeah, hi, my name is Sarah Peel. I'm based in Shanghai. I'm a Canadian teacher. I've been living and working in China now for about 18 years. And as John mentioned, I did the Derby program where I did my PGCE as well as my iQTS as part of the pilot group that was in the first group of people who did the iQTS. And we finished in, spring 2023. So I work at a bilingual school in Shanghai, but that's closely affiliated with a large British school group.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was interesting times.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. So so we're going to talk about the iQTS only program, but if you do have any questions about other things, as long as they're related to stuff that we do offer, so not anything sort of off menu like MBAs or anything like that, I can certainly try to answer as much as we can. If for any reason we can't answer any of the questions that you do ask, I will endeavour to get back to the university and find out an answer for you, and then provide you with as much of an answer as I can. Okay, so to be honest, this isn't probably that relevant because there's not that many of us today, but any questions you do have, just type them in the chat as we're going along. I do find this is the easiest way to answer things as we go along, and what we'll try to do is we'll just answer those questions at the end. It could be that a question that you ask I will answer later on, so don't feel like any questions sort of off limits, as long as it's related to the course. And try to be although there's not that many people today, but try to be as general as possible and not too specific about your particular context. So I might not be able to answer specific contexts about specific schools sort of straight off the bat, but I will try. So just try and make the questions as not as generic, but just try to make them as open as possible, so then other people will also find them interesting. All right. So I guess the main thing is, why would you want to do this? What are the benefits? So one of the things that we can, one of the things that we do ask people to bear in mind is when they're doing the course is, why would you want to do the course? I guess the main thing is for the iQTS is it's globally recognized. You can use this course actually in more locations than just with the QTS on its own, because it's part of you get the QTS alongside the iQTS at the same time. The fact that it's a 120-hour, or minimum of 120 hours, it does mean that it is allowed to be used in other countries as well. So there are some specific places that the QTS potentially couldn't be recognized, Malaysia being one of them, Hong Kong being another one potentially, if it's just on its own. So the iQTS is a really, it's a well-recognized course. It is globally accepted. It is recognized, but it's endorsed by the University of West of England in the UK. And if you do apply for any job anywhere in the world, you will be listed as a qualified teacher in England. So you will be part of the teacher database in England. So when anybody is looking to see whether you are a qualified teacher, they will be able to search your what they call a teacher registration number, or a TRN, and they will be able to search you on the database and find you there. So it's really important that it is well recognized and can be used in pretty much any country in the world. Another really important part, which I know a lot of non-British, maybe Canadian Americans, Australians to a certain extent, but countries that do teaching licenses, this isn't a teaching license, but it is also a teaching license. So the reason it's not a teaching license is you don't have to keep on renewing it. So any license, whether it's a driving license, anything like that, there are periods when you have to renew it for particular reasons. And when you become a qualified teacher in England specifically, or in Scotland, Wales as well, Northern Ireland, you do not need to renew your skills. You don't have to renew the license at any point for when you get it. There obviously are problems with that, but that's the rules as they stand at the moment. I don't see them changing that. And actually, when you're working abroad, it is actually a really, really valuable thing, because often if you are getting a teaching license from a particular state, especially in the US, whether it's a particular license from, say, Washington or places like that, the regulations for those particular licenses have a tendency to change. And if they do change, you're not aware of those changes, because obviously you're not living in that particular state or in the country, some people do get caught out by that. So it is one of the main benefits of getting what we call a teaching license in the UK, is that you don't have to worry about it going out of date. The iQTS is aimed at teachers that aren't necessarily teachers with a lot of experience, especially international school experience. You might be a teacher that has a lot of experience, but maybe in an alternative setting. You might be working in a kindergarten, you might be working in a language center, and there's nothing wrong with that. You've got the skills, you are, in all intents and purposes, a qualified teacher, but you don't necessarily have the background to allow you to do qualified teacher status, the assessment only. So this is a really good way, or what we call a sort of a backdoor into getting qualified teacher status. It allows you to become a qualified teacher without having to jump through too many hoops. So what we mean by that is you can be in a single school and have maybe a couple of years experience in that international school setting, but you don't need to then jump to another school in order to do the course. You can stay where you are and get the alternative setting within your current school, which is different to what you would have to do if you're doing QTS assessment only. So that's the big difference between the two. But essentially, you are creating a portfolio which meets all the teaching standards. And for you to do that, you need to obviously follow what the UWE Bristol are asking you to do. But essentially, it is exactly the same as doing QTS assessment only, but just over an extended period of time. So what that allows you to do is to reflect on what you're doing. It's not sort of just get all the paperwork together and rush it in over a sort of 6 to 12 week period. You've got 36 weeks. It's not a huge amount of time, but it's certainly a lot more time than you would be doing over 6 to 8 weeks, which is pretty much what you end up doing with QTS. So you have time to reflect, you have time to get feedback from the university, from your mentors, and it is a learning process to actually improve yourself as a teacher and as a professional practitioner. So it is really, really important that you have a distinction between why you want to do the QTS and why you want to do the iQTS. It might be just that you don't want to leave the current school you're in. You've only got one school's experience, which is fine. But it might also be that you are relatively inexperienced in the international system and you want to improve as a teacher. And if that is the case, then iQTS is a really good route because it does give you time and space and a lot of time to develop as a teacher and to improve as well. So also from a school's perspective, from a career advancement perspective, schools do like this. Of course, it is more expensive. It's almost double the price. Well, it's pretty much double the price of what you would do for QTS. But actually, schools like it because it allows you to improve as a teacher. And obviously, if you're improving as a teacher and you're staying on as a teacher at the school, then obviously that's a huge benefit and a huge sort of fit for all the for the school that you're working in. So you can use this as a way of career advancement. So you could be at a particular, you could potentially be at a, I hate using the word TS, but you could be at a bilingual school. You might be at a local, you might be in a local school in an international, teaching an international curriculum. You might want to go, you might want to move outside of the country you're in at the moment. You might want to move to a better school with better pay and conditions. And often, if you want to do that, you really do need to have the paperwork and the credentials to do that. And that's one of the things that this allows you to do, right? Also, I know a lot of people on the call today that I recognize quite a lot of people that are here. A lot of you do have the PGC, a lot of you do have the IPGC, but obviously that gives you a general overview of what you're doing. It gives you a general understanding of what pedagogy is and what best practice is in the classroom, but it doesn't give you the subject specialization. So the subject specialization is really what sets you apart. So if you can have the IPGC and the PGC on one side, which is like what I always say is like the theory, and then what you've got on the other side is the QTS and the iQTS, which is like the practical side. And then combining those together, it kind of gives you what would be essentially the teaching license in, say, the US or Canada or places like that. So the iQTS does allow you to have specialization, I think, in 11 different subject areas. If for any reason that those subject areas aren't on the list that we provide for you, please let us know, because what we found is that that UWE Bristol is pretty flexible. And I know that a lot of you probably don't know the ins and outs of universities, but universities don't necessarily employ people to do these pathway tutor positions full time, and they can bring them on and take them off staff according to what the demand is. So, for example, we had a couple of teachers just recently saying, "I really want to do economics at iQTS." That wasn't on the list. I fed that back to Karen, who runs the course at UWE, and she said, "Well, actually, the business pathway tutor can also do economics." So now they're going to open up economics for iQTS. Someone else came back to me and said, "I really want to do design and technology." So now I fed that back to the university, and now they're looking to see if they can find a pathway tutor for design and technology. So if your particular subject area is not on the list, just let us know, and then we'll feed that back to the university and find out. But what we will say is that early years is unlikely to come on this list. All right. So if you are doing early years, it's gonna be a tough one, to be honest. So I know that some universities do it, which is great. But if you are doing early years, just try and say that you're doing year one, which is normally final year of kindergarten in Asia anyway. So if you're teaching 6 and 7-year-olds, that's fine. But if you're teaching younger than that, it's going to be a bit of a problem, to be honest. So just bear that in mind. I do apologize. Probably should have updated these photos, which are all university done. Anyway, it's all right. Obviously, personal growth, expanding your network. So I'm sure people who've graduated from this course will also confirm this. Personal growth is a really important one. When you are doing this course, it is, I know a lot of people, I know Sarah was probably in a similar boat. The reason you're doing this is obviously to improve yourself as a teacher and to improve yourself as a teaching professional, but also, you are also gaining networking opportunities as well. So all the people on the course will be working in alternative settings to yourself. They could be in other countries, they could be teaching in different schools. And it is really, really important to build up these networks as you're going along. And the more people you know, the more networks or the bigger the network you have, it is really important. Actually, when you actually boil down the number of people that are actually teaching internationally, it isn't that many people. So actually, when even if it's only a small cohort on the iQTS, you'll find that there won't be more than 1 or 2 degrees of separation between one person that they know and one person that you know. So it's really important to sort of build up those networks, and it's great as well to find out sort of the inside. I don't like to say gossip, but it's always good to get an inside track on a potential place that you're going to go to move to, find out what the teachers feel about it, try and speak to somebody who's working at the school. So, and then potentially somebody will know the principal or the head of HR at the school, and it's never a bad thing to have people in those positions. So the next one then, what we've found from, the people that did the course for this particular iQTS assessment only, they only started in September, so we're just getting feedback from them over in the last couple of weeks. But in general, they've said that 5 hours a week is probably about enough. I know that Sarah, that would not have been the case. Yeah, but specifically for the iQTS only, that will also include the observations that people do. And actually, that's something else that your school would need to be aware of as well. The amount of work that people need to do now with the recording online of classes and the AI that actually observes and creates an observation form for your classes, the amount of time and the amount of effort that your mentor needs to do is hugely reduced, even in the last 6 months. So actually, when you present this to potentially to a mentor or somebody within your school, you just need to bear in mind that they might be thinking about somebody who did QTS or somebody who did a PGCE in the past, and there was a lot of work, there's a lot of manpower, but actually that's really greatly reduced now. You don't really need to be, of course, it's nice to have people to give like detailed feedback and all the rest of it, but a lot of this paperwork is now done automatically because you record the lesson, the lesson's reserved by your laptop, and then the transcript is created in the background by an AI bot, and then that timestamps when you are meeting specific teaching standards or things that you're doing within the classroom and creates an observation form. So it's for the mentor, it's really, really helpful and really useful because they don't really need to, they can focus on what you're actually doing in the classroom rather than worrying about what teaching standards you're meeting and all the rest of it. So they can actually be a lot more, I would say, a lot more hands-on and a lot more practical about, how you're interacting with students, how you're moving around the classroom and things like that. So it has changed a lot in the last 6 months. And if you speak to anybody that's done the course recently, it's pretty much night and day compared to what it was probably even a year ago. You've got access to all the materials through the University of West of England portal. It's not really, I would say you don't really have, you have some interaction with the university lecturers and your pathway tutor, but you don't actually have formal lectures per se. If there is something specific that they feel that you are needing help with, they might have a one-to-one session with you for maybe 15, 20 minutes and say how you can improve in the classroom. But as such, there's no study material per se. There's no set study materials that you need to go through. There will be some recommended reading and some things that you can look at before you start the course, but it's really sort of geared towards you, what you're doing well in, and maybe sort of reinforcing that, and then also areas that you maybe need to have some additional help with. They maybe give you some tips and maybe give you some materials that you can go away and reflect on and then use in the classroom. So the idea is that you're continuously or incrementally improving yourself as a teacher throughout that 36-week period. And then you create a portfolio at the end of it, which then reflects what you're doing in the classroom, which you can then present for being awarded iQTS and QTS. Right, so I will ask some questions to you, Sarah. Apologies,
Sure.
apologies, I haven't asked you, but they're pretty straightforward questions. So, I know you finished the course a relatively long time ago, but I still think it's a valid question. So, have you noticed any improvements in your teaching practice since completing the course?
Well, I think it really started, as you mentioned, when you do the QTS. It's very much about showing growth and growing in that program. But once you've trained that way, you don't stop. That you
Yeah,
really, I think I'm a much more reflective teacher. I know better what to do when something's not. Everyone can usually identify when something's not going well in the classroom or when you feel like something could have gone better. But you have the tools then to go back and look and say, oh, what if we try it this way? Or how to have difficult conversations. Because often, um, in your QTS, when you're working with a mentor, you're really reflecting on your practice, but also talking about what you can do. So I feel like for me, becoming a more reflective practitioner was definitely part of it. And that's kept going.
so is there anything there specifically that they did during the course that you thought went that really helped you, like in terms of like the feedback that they gave you and things like that?
I think for me, in terms of when we talk about putting that portfolio together, it really focuses you on the teaching standards. And I think in my own experience previous to that, I'd worked in lots of different schools with lots of different curriculums and lots of different sets of leadership who would say, oh, well, this is important now, and this is what's important now. And I'm more confident as an individual teacher in saying, in my classroom, this is what I set up. This is how we work on managing classrooms and managing students who are struggling. I think it also really helped me with differentiation and being able to better identify students who have specific needs, both at the top end and at the low end of your class, and making sure that everybody learns, because you really are training yourself to scan for that, especially when you're working with a mentor or you're working with your pathway tutor who's a specialist in your area. They have a lot to offer and a lot to reflect back to you, and then you bring that and you go, okay, oh, remember that time,
Yeah,
let's try
yeah,
this again. And it fills out, and really, again, with those teaching standards, really fills out a very clear expectation in your own mind, because you have to organize your own work and you have to organize and reflect on what you're doing in the classroom to complete your QTS. But
yeah.
it's not a box ticking activity. Like, it very much is building the skills you need.
So would you say in terms of the teaching standards, do you think they were limiting, or do you think they actually helped in terms of like improving yourself as a teacher?
Oh, it absolutely helped. It
Yeah,
absolutely helped. Even just taking the time.
yeah,
Every teacher has a lot to do in the classroom, but being able to take the time to stop and think about what you're doing and think about how you can do it a different way becomes part of your practice.
yeah, yeah. That is interesting. Yeah, because I think even though some people sort of when they look at the teaching standards, they say, well, I don't really do a lot of those in the classrooms. Like, well, those those teaching standards are pretty universal, I would thought. Like,
Very.
well, they should be. And I say to people, if you're a little bit unsure about those teaching standards and what they mean to you as a teacher, then I think probably you're not ready to start. Like, if you're not doing them like just in general, there might be some things you're a little bit unsure about, but yeah, I would have thought they're pretty universal. But yeah, okay. Um, would you recommend this course, or would you recommend that? I suppose you did the IPGCE with the iQTS, but specifically the iQTS section of it, would you recommend it to other teachers?
Yeah, and I have actually suggested to other teachers that I work with, especially if you're coming from, as you said, a non-traditional teaching background, or
Yeah,
if you became a teacher later in your career. Not all of us knew we wanted to be teachers when we first went to university when we were 18 or 19 years old.
yeah,
And there's a lot of value in doing the course and recognizing the skills you bring. And it's also been very valuable for me in terms of ongoing career. It's improved my teaching practice, but it's also a point where I can say I have completed this well recognized credential. And I've had some very interesting conversation actually with school leaders. I'm actually changing jobs this year. And I've had interesting conversations with school leaders who are like, tell me about this course. Like I did a QTS. What's the difference? How do you, what did you enjoy? Did you have to do a portfolio? And so they are very aware of how it's structured and what it gives you as a teacher.
So would you say that that's helped you? Do you think that's helped you in going into interviews and things like that, and being more confident in staff meetings and CPD and things like that?
Yeah, definitely. Um, Again, because you're working with a mentor and you're working with someone at the university, at least part of the time, um, you have to be able to talk about what you're doing in very clear ways and make those connections with what you're doing. And it's not just regurgitating it. And it does make good confidence and just practice. Often as teachers, if you're working in a setting, you don't get to practice. You don't get to improve on what you're doing every day in the classroom. But QTS really focuses you on doing that. And it brings together experiences and ideas into a really coherent way of considering your pedagogy and your approach to the classroom.
So what aspects of the course did you find most valuable to your professional development? I guess we've kind of touched on a little bit on that already, but
yeah, a little bit. In terms of having a credential, a recognized credential, that was the main thing for me. The other thing, though, was that I think surprised me a little bit because I have taught for a long time, was how useful doing teaching observations. In my case, on my course, it was every week. Really was for me as a teacher. Because usually within our professional development in the context I work in, you might have informal observations maybe once a month, but you would have a formal observation maybe twice a year.
maximum, yeah.
Yeah, where you get feedback or where you get suggestions or, even just praise on what you're doing well. And
Yeah.
a lot of the time you're just there on your own. And most of the time I think we get it right, but you could get it great. And that being able to really work and be able to work on specific areas or have my mentor say, hey, you're doing really well in this area. For example, you're in classroom management. This is going really well. Next week, I'd like you to focus on stretch and challenge. We've obviously sorted this out. Let's do that. Or have you considered trying doing this way? Try it next week. We'll see how it goes. And if it doesn't go well, you can talk about why and another strategy. There's always another way.
Yeah.
But really having time to work with a mentor was, I wouldn't underestimate the power that can have for you as an individual.
So would you say that the pathway tutor at the university or the mentor in the school was most useful, or are they both sort of
I mean, definitely the
both ways?
mentor, it's both ways in that it's sort of two different perspectives, right? The mentor in the school really knows what you're up against, really knows what you're doing in the classroom, understands where you're starting from, and is with you every step of the way. The mentor, the pathway mentor that at Darby, in my case, was excellent. They were fantastic. And in some ways, they were actually far more positive and encouraging. Whereas my mentor wanted me to keep working at it, and that they have their own perspectives as well from your own school, what they're working on for their school development plan, or their ideas of what your career might be. So it's a different perspective. Both were very valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think probably the pathway tutor might be looking at it from more of an academic perspective rather than a sort of a practical
Oh,
because they can't unless they visit your school and spend time in your school, it's really hard for them to understand your context properly, right?
but it was also very positive in that the context that they bring, because it's a little bit removed from your school,
Yeah.
is much more you as a teacher.
Yeah.
And they're there to help you. They're there to help you become a really great teacher. And they use that academic perspective where they feed that back to you and give you tools you can use
Yeah.
or perspectives you might not otherwise have.
Yeah. As you said, that I think that's really they've got a bit more of a sort of strategic view of everything of what what great teaching is in lots of different contexts, right? So they can maybe give you some ideas that potentially that maybe somebody at your school maybe isn't aware of. So I think it is important. Okay. Uh, do you feel more confident and prepared for better teaching positions after completing your course?
Yes, definitely. Um, I think I I'm a big proponent and supporter of bilingual education, and I think it is something that in China we do really well in
Yeah.
many contexts.
Yeah.
Um, but that's not always seen by people outside those organizations. Sometimes teachers who come and work in a bilingual context are seen as somewhat lesser or somewhat less qualified. And I think in the past that's often been very true. But since I finished my QTS, there's not been any question about my skills or my knowledge, and it's opened up more organizations to consider me as someone who's qualified and who would be a great teacher for them without me having to really push that or justify who I am or what I do well. There's a fundamental understanding that if you have the QTS or in my the iQTS, you have been judged against a standard and you are a qualified teacher equivalent to anyone who's come out with the same education in the UK.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I think that's the key of the qualification, right? I think as you said, there is a certain, I don't know, there is a hierarchy. There is, what you know, is when you're applying for jobs, there is a certain hierarchy for people qualifying from different countries, whether they qualified in country or whether they qualified online, whether they've worked in specific schools, and there is a certain bias, right?
Yeah.
When you're unfortunately, um, there is a bias when people are hiring. Often it's unconscious bias where the people just haven't come across, as you said, they haven't come across maybe, if you're planning to apply for a job, say, I don't know, in Bangkok or some other country or some other city outside of China, they just might not be aware of the great work that goes on in bilingual schools in China. They just maybe just know that. And, the American schools, the ISBs, and they might just don't know about what's going on elsewhere. So yeah, but as you said, the qualification then should really cut through that and at least get you onto the maybe pile for interview, which is kind of what it's all about, right? Once you get to interview, you can justify yourself.
Yeah, gets you in the door and lets you, prove that you have the base skills. And then after that, it's up to you to shine and be
Yeah,
your fantastic self.
yeah, because you can't showcase what you did if you're not in an interview, right? Can you? So which is pretty much which is what a lot of the qualifications do improve you as a teacher, but they also, as you said, they get you off from the definitely no pile to the maybe pile. That if you're not on that maybe pile, then you can't do anything. You can't push to get a job at that particular school. So do you think it would be would you would you say that you would be more confident in applying for jobs? I know you said you've spent a lot of time working in China and working in bilingual schools. Do you think it's made you more confident to apply for jobs outside of China as well? Because I know a lot of
Yeah,
people are looking at that at the moment with the market as it is. You know.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, we certainly considered that. That's not what I've ended up doing for next
Yeah.
year, but when I made my initial inquiries, even to the UK, the qualification is well recognized that having that teacher registration number
Yeah.
that people look up on their own is actually a really important piece of this. Um, the other thing is that internationally, I think it's given me the confidence that I know what I'm doing. I can walk into another setting,
Yeah.
bring those skills forward, but it's also given schools the context of who I am and the education I have,
Yeah.
and that they confident that when I come in,
Yeah, yeah.
you're going to work as part of a staff and part of the community.
As you said, it's a two-way street, right? They want to be confident that they're employing someone that they're not going to have lots of problems with, right? So, which is fair, well, they're a business, right? They don't want to have these awkward conversations with parents and things saying, why is Sarah doing this? Why is Sarah doing it's it's a business, so that they need to be confident that you're coming in and you're a safe pair of hands, which obviously the qualifications add to that, right? Along with everything else. Okay. How has the iQTS prepared you for what your future sorry, I'll put my teeth in. How has the iQTS prepared you for your future career plans? Obviously, you don't have to like set out what your career goals for the rest of your life is, but do
Yeah,
you think it's helped?
I'm not enough of a grown up to know what I'm doing for the rest of my life yet. I keep waiting for that to happen, but
Me too.
um,
It's fine. It's the best way.
yeah. For me, actually, what it's done is I was an early years specialist and I did qualify in Key Stage 1. So what it's done is it's opened up the door to primary teaching
Yeah.
for me, and it's allowed me to understand where my skills can fit in a primary context, and that I really do have a lot to offer in that context. And I couldn't have done that without the credential.
Yeah, that's the other thing as well, is as you said, if you are working in one particular context, so you said if you're working in early years, and sometimes I know a lot of teachers that come approach myself and other people as well. Sometimes you feel a little bit stuck, right? Because, especially in China, because you can be paid very, very well for working early years, and it can be quite comfortable. But then sometimes, you feel professionally maybe there isn't much of a area for growth, especially if you're in a small school or you're in a kindergarten and things like that. So maybe, sometimes you want to break out of that, and as you said, if you can get qualified for, as you said, for key stage one, then once you're in key stage one, you can pretty much do whatever you want then, can't you? So there's a lot more.
Yeah, and I think it's given me the confidence and then the ability to talk about how I can apply the experiences I've had, because I also did do those placements in Key Stage 1 and was able to prove to myself, like, no, I can really do this.
Yeah. So how do you taught key stage one previously, or?
I've done a little bit of work in year one,
Yeah.
but previous.
All right.
Yeah.
So in terms of, because that's something that I think most of the people that will be doing the IQTS will have to do an alternative key stage, and one of the things that the course does lend itself for is to, you don't have to move to another. One of the main reasons why a lot of people do this job is, or do this particular qualification, is they don't want to leave the current school they're in for various reasons. Maybe their kids are settled or they're on a good package or whatever. So it does allow you to have the second placement within your current school. So did you do that in your current
Yes.
school? Yeah.
Because I was in the pilot program, I was actually able to do the majority of my placement in early years. I know that that's changed since,
Yeah. But
uh, at least with Bristol. But I was able to do that, and then my second placement was in primary, was in year 1, year 2, and specifically very focused on literacy, which was for me my teaching experience. I had some experience working in literacy, but not as much,
yeah.
you know. So as a way to be able to go in and really specialize in something that I was interested in and learn more about teaching, it was a great way to do that, but also a very safe way to get the
Yeah.
experience
Because you,
and credential without having to say, I'm going to throw myself in being a primary teacher right now today for a whole year. Or,
well, yeah. Well, that's the thing. If you want to do the QTS, often people will have to leave the school. It's like, well, if people are telling me or asking me, do you think I should just leave the school to get this qualification? It's like, well, no, because it's kind of madness. Because you might move to a school that you really don't like, and if you're somewhere where you like, just pay the extra money, do the iQTS, and you get QTS at the end of it. You might be slightly out of pocket, but if you like where you are, like, it's cool. quite a valuable thing, to be honest, in any profession, especially in schools, right? If you're in a good school that you're well suited to and you're comfortable with, and if you're doing an additional qualification in a different school that you don't know anything about, that's kind of lining you up for quite a lot of problems, in my opinion. But some people are happy to move, and maybe they're planning to move anyway, and they're happy just to do the QTS when they move to their new school. But um, I feel like the IQTS is a good alternative.
So I
Yeah.
will just stress for people who are in a context where your visa is connected to your job, being able to stay in your school is a much safer option, um, because you don't have to try and change your visa sponsor. So, yes, it costs a little more, but I don't know, in my own context, it didn't make any sense at all for me to give up what I was doing.
No, and actually, I do try to sort of try to explain to people like if you're planning to be a teacher, this qualification is for the rest of your life. So if you divide the £2,000 or whatever, like £2,400 extra that you're paying over the rest of your life, that isn't a lot of money. Like it's nothing really. Like, and especially if you're working in China or in a lot of other Asian countries, £2,400 is not a lot. When if you look at the packages that you're going to be on after you finish the course or the package you're currently on, it may seem like a lot to begin like when you're paying it, but when you divide it over the number of years that you're going to be working and the extra money you're going to be earning being a qualified teacher, it's it's probably one of the best investments you're going to make, to be honest. So I always try and stress that with people. But has anyone got any questions? You don't have to type it. If you want to just turn the microphone on, you can also do that. Anyone got any questions? Brendan, Nicole, Rocky, Rolene. I'll have a look to see if there's any questions on the WeChat. I know people like put stuff on WeChat. Anyone got any questions?
Oh, Brendan's just texting,
Oh
and
yeah,
so
so
is
what curriculums are accepted? Yeah, good question. So yeah, uh, in terms of um, in terms of when Sarah did it, it is a little bit. It is well, actually, it's a lot more. Um, it's a lot more flexible than Derby. Derby was extremely inflexible, but that's partly due to the fact that it was a new course and um, it was a pilot program, so they couldn't really sort of push the envelope too much. But they were Derby are extremely strict. The department, their education department is extremely strict on all the rules and all the regulations, whereas the UWE Bristol less so, and they're a little bit more internationally minded. So the person that runs the course has worked internationally previously. So curriculum wise, you can pretty much do anything. You can pretty much do most curricula as long as it is easily mapped and easily sort of put alongside what you would be doing. So in key stage 1 and 2, so primary school, if it's easily mapped against the national curriculum, which to be honest, most international curriculums are. The only thing I would say is if you're doing Montessori, it's not going to work. All right. So as soon as anyone says Montessori, that's just like out the yeah, it's just not going to work. So if you are working at a Montessori school, I'm sorry, but it's because Montessori will be in your title of your school, and it's just not going to work just because it is so different compared with what you do in England. But in terms of international curriculum, I would say the vast majority is sort of IB curriculum, American curriculum, Canadian curriculum, usually bilingual curriculum in China. In general, I would say most of it's accepted, especially in primary. The only thing is that you need to be working as a homeroom teacher. So I know that that is often a problem to a certain extent in bilingual schools because a lot of bilingual schools will have specific maths teachers and science teachers that work with your students. So that's okay, but as long as when you're doing the course, you are doing those. So as long as you can bring those into your teaching whilst you're doing the course, UWE Bristol will not be particularly bothered whether you've been doing them in the past. As long as you're doing them whilst you're doing the course and somebody signs off saying that you're going to do it, yeah, they're not going to fly out and find out what you're doing in the school. So, um,
What
what was your experience of that? I know Derby was super strict with your particular course.
because it was the pilot, so what that pilot program really meant was the course that I was on was proving to the Department of Education that this could be an equivalent credential to
Yeah.
QTS. Okay, so it was very closely scrutinized, very carefully followed. That said, the curriculum at my school was never questioned. Part of that's where I work. Part of it was that I had a really good mentor, and we worked with our university course people to make sure that everybody understood that we had to teach the whole curriculum. So as John said, you don't have to do it every day, but you need to fill the gaps. So when you're putting your portfolio together, you need to prove that you can do this, even if you don't do it every day in your job, which means proving you can do science, proving that you have the math skills, and that if you've done some of this, if you've already done IPGCE, you can put some of your academic evidence in there as well to back up the experiences you have in the classroom, but they do need to be observed. So it may just be a matter of working with someone at your school and saying, I need to come and teach. For me, it was phonics, the systemic synthetic phonics. It's very much stressed in those early years and key stage 1 programs. We had to make sure that I had sort of some hours in that. So it'll be different for everybody's context, but you are going to need to make sure that you meet all of those standards. But that's what the pathway person is there to help you do and identify that.
Yeah, so I, yeah, also the meeting all the standards and all the rest of it. It is really important that you are aware of all the 12 teaching standards. But once you started the course, like they'll become kind of, you know, you'll be saying them in your sleep kind of thing. So it's all about as you said, it's all about proving that you're teaching to those teaching standards and you have at least a couple of pieces of evidence for each one of them. And actually, once you start doing these observations, and the observations are now done online via your laptop, so to be honest, it's quite easy to build up that portfolio very, very quickly. If you're doing at least one or two observations a week, you'll build up that portfolio super quick. Um, yeah, okay. So Brendan, what you're saying about the ESL, it all really depends on how does that how does what you're teaching relate to what you would potentially be doing in the UK? And if you can justify what you're doing, and maybe if within your school they're maybe teaching some other curriculum, maybe IGCSE or AP or something like that, then that's no problem. But obviously, if you were just doing ESL and it's kind of quite generic, it might be a bit of a problem. But um, I'm happy if you can message me and we can work it out. It like a lot of things in a lot of bilingual schools, you've actually got quite a lot of freedom in terms of especially as an ESL teacher and what you're doing. So there's plenty of ways that you can, especially in English, there's lots of different ways that you could maybe adapt what you're doing to actually suit what you could potentially be justifying to the UWE Bristol. Whereas, there might be some other subjects that are going to be a little bit more difficult to do. But see, English is probably the easiest one that you can adapt to suit the needs.
Mhm.
But the most important thing is you can't be teaching a subject in primary level. That's the other thing you can't be doing. You have to be teaching homeroom. So if I know a lot of people are PE teachers, a lot of people are English teachers, music teachers, art teachers, things like that in primary. Um, yeah, that's not going to work. You need to be teaching across all the key stages. So if you are teaching some primary, maybe you're teaching 40% primary 60% secondary. When you're applying, you just say you're a secondary teacher. You don't have to don't mention don't mention primary. Um, and again, like you'll have more than enough hours and observation opportunities to pass the course, so it shouldn't be a problem.
I
Yeah,
think one
just
thing I would
yeah, go on.
is just to this is the time of year where schools are starting to plan for next year. So if you do want to do your course, now's the time to talk to the management in your school, talk to your school leaders, try and identify a mentor. But then also, really, it's a chance for you to look what you need to and to ask for things. So if you've been working as an ESL teacher, but there are homeroom teacher positions that will be coming available in September, put your hand up now. So when I did my qualification, I moved from being a music specialist, which I had done for several years, and I really enjoyed, but you can't do the qualification in that area. So I moved back into the classroom. Um, and I was happy to do that, and the school was happy to have me do that.
Yeah, it's a
You
good
know,
point.
so
Yeah,
it's
because
the time
this
of
is the
year.
time of year where all of a sudden new positions do come up because people have found a better position somewhere that's also come up somewhere else, right? So this is when pretty much you can actually, if there are positions available, the HR are more than happy to certainly move an ESL teacher into a homeroom position because that's going to be a lot harder to fill than it is an ESL position. So um, yeah, that's a good point. Very good point. And as again, if you are doing ESL and there are some IGCSE or some A level IB AP programs, if you can get one of those classes, even if it's just one class, even if it's like I don't know, a couple of lessons a week IGCSE, and then all of a sudden you're an English language teacher IGCSE, you're also doing ESL, that's not a problem. But if you're just doing ESL, it becomes quite hard to then justify to the university you're the right person doing it. So, anyone else got any other questions? Yes, no, I don't think so. I think we're all. Well, I know all of these. I think has everybody got my WeChat? I'll put it in there anyway. I do want to change my Derby IPGC web WeChat, but I've been told if I change it, then people can't find me, so I can't change it. So it is what it is. Yeah, if you want to get hold of me, please just do that on WeChat. I think everybody's. I'm connected to everybody on here. I don't know who Rocky is, but I'm sure I can find Rocky in one of the group chats. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Sarah, in terms of?
No, I think I would just, if you're thinking about doing it, um, find a way. I think probably if you've come to a meeting like this and you're thinking, okay, I this will work for me, find a way to make it work. Yes, it's a lot of work for a year. You know, it will be a very busy year for you as a teacher, but what you take away from it at the end is worth it, and it's definitely worth putting the work in. Um, and if it is something you're doing and you're doing it with a family, because I certainly did, talk to your family about what that's going to look like and get the support you need because you can be successful and balance this with a career and with family. But you do need to plan it.
Yeah, and as you said before, speak to your head, speak to the deputy head, speak to whoever's in charge of your timetable next year. You never know if you speak to them and they might come up with like a plum position that you didn't know about that's all of a sudden come up, or they're expanding in one area and you've not really thought about it. You know, as you said, if you don't ask, you don't get. So, and often, teachers are relatively shy about asking for things as well. So if you're doing a course and you want to improve yourself, that's always a good thing, right? And I'm sure the school will be more than happy to support you. And also, you know, it's never a problem as well. I know schools are relatively tight on budgets these days, but you can also ask, is there any way that I can get some can I use some of the CPD budget for this course? Maybe the school can pay for it, and then you pay the school back. That often works, especially for the school, because that's obviously tax deductible because it's a paid course. So for the school, it's cheaper to do this than it is to pay tax on your wages. So find out what the school can do. Often paying for it, especially from a P&L or a financial perspective to the school, it's actually cheaper to pay for your course in advance and then for you to then pay it back from your wages. So that might be also another way of doing it. So
Mhm.
ask away and see what you get. Anyone got any other questions? If not, I'll call it a day. And there is one slide left. Okay. Oh, personal statements arrive. Personal state. It's okay. So, next steps. You can. I think most of you have registered on the link that we've sent in the group. If not, try and do that. Put Send us your personal statement, school recommendation letter. Um, Normally they will ask for two letters, but I think you can normally get away with just one. Certainly one that's related to this course. The other one could just be a normal recommendation letter you got from your last school. Collect together your degrees and transcripts. Other things that you will need to get is your GCSEs in maths and science, or if you are a secondary teacher, and then maths and English, sorry, if you're secondary, and then maths, science, and English if you're primary, at GCSE level, so that's middle school and high school. I know that some of you um, they might not be they might not be to hand because you've never been asked for them for the last 25 years. But you still need them. If you haven't got them since it's September, I would start, especially if you are from certain countries. Um, I won't name any, South Africa, which seems to be like the worst place ever to replace certificates. But if you haven't got them and maybe your parents can't dig them out, you haven't got a picture of them, which often happens, maybe start to try and find out how you can get those certificates. The other thing you need to have is a criminal record or the non-criminal record from the local police station. So wherever you are based, if you're in China, that's the PSB. If you're outside of China, um, that can be done in various places, but normally it's through the police. And then just start the application process. We always say just do the application and then wait for them to come back to you asking for additional paperwork. So if you haven't got everything together and you really want to do it, just apply. Don't put all the paperwork in if you haven't got it. Apply anyway, and then they'll give you a list of a conditional offer of what you need to give back to them. And then if you meet all those conditions, you're on the course. And you don't need to pay anything until August. So you've got a bit of time to save up. And then there's monthly payments, which you can do via Union Pay or bank transfer, whatever. There's lots of different ways to pay, so you'll be fine. And then we will follow it with UWE Bristol to push for them to accept your offer. Okay. If there's no more questions, any more questions? I don't think so. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sarah, for taking time out this evening. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening to us. If there's any other questions that maybe you haven't asked or you would like